In today's video, we're going to take a look at Forza Horizon 5 on the Xbox Series X and break down the HDR for you and tell you which HDR mode is the best to use and how to set up these HDR modes respectively. So we'll go through Dolby Vision, HGiG, and then HDR tone mapping on. I'll also throw in some side-by-side comparisons of SDR and HDR so that you can see what you'd be missing out on if you're just able to get SDR. I know a lot of people ask me about that all the time, so I'm going to try to show this the best way I possibly can. So taking a look at all of these image split right now, we do have Dolby Vision, HGiG, HDR tone mapping on. The biggest difference with these are going to be the way that the highlights are presented to you. And with HDR tone mapping on, this is going to be the brightest image possible, but it is at the expense of some accuracy. You will see that yes, highlights are brighter, but also the whole entire image itself is lifted. So you'll see shadows lifted as well as the whole entire image. If you take a look at the top of the vehicle here, you can see exactly what I'm saying with that. Overall, that's going to be a preference. Now let's take a look at Dolby Vision and HGiG side by side. Really, this is a tough one. It's hard to say which one is going to be better for you. Personally, what I felt like was Dolby Vision had a little bit more brighter highlights in the sky. Like the blue felt like it was brighter, but I felt like the lava on this example here was brighter. And then I realized that maybe that's not even the case because there's some dynamic weather going on here, even with like some of the clouds and some of the steam coming from the volcano. It's all a little bit different each time you run this simulation. But for the most time, the day is the same. And if you look at the side by side here, it's very, very identical. There's not much difference going on. So I do feel like for the most part, these examples are going to show pretty much the same exact look. Now, whether or not one is brighter than the other, I felt like maybe HGiG does give you brighter highlights overall. This is just a preference-based thing. From me personally, I think that HGiG is the way to play. Taking a look at when they are, when we're in the sky right here, you could see slightly brighter highlights from HGiG. And just overall image is slightly brighter. So I don't know, it's just really hard to complain about HDR in this game. It looks really good. Take a look at how SDR looks next to it, and this is why you won't want to run SDR versus HDR. Now, do keep in mind this though, because HDR, SDR on the LG C1, SDR is at a severe disadvantage on the LG C1. Game mode in SDR, not very good on LG C1, so you do want to keep that in mind. Maybe a different TV with a better SDR mode will give you better results. But in my opinion, I still would play in HDR just because I feel like that's the way the game is intended to be played. And the high dynamic range in this game is absolutely beautiful. There's no doubt about it, whether you play in Dolby Vision or HGiG, you're going to get a great experience. And even if you play an HDR tone mapping on, you'll still get a very great experience as well because you're still going to be able to play the way that you want to play. And the highlights are going to be bright and the image is going to be lifted in every other area. But if you do prefer that brighter look overall on your LG C1 or any other LG OLED for that matter, it's going to look really good. Now, one thing I found with the LG C1 when I was playing this game is that Game Optimizer performs a little bit differently in their respective modes. So we have RPG that is going to look exactly the same as standard, except for the RPG mode is going to give us a bit of a color boost. And I did check to make sure that all of the settings matched up. They were the same exact settings all across the board. And I even set the FPS settings the same as standard as well. So you could see that it doesn't matter what mode you're in as long as it's not standard for the Game Optimizer. You are getting somewhat of a color boost or a saturation boost. I found this very interesting and I just wanted to share it with you guys because I haven't heard anybody else bring this up. I think I might have said something about it in my review that I did, but I never went in depth about it because I never thought about it too much. Okay, now let's get into how to set up HDR game calibration for each mode. For the number one mode that I recommend playing, which is HGiG, you're going to want to do this for the LG C1. So you're going to want to go into your game system options and make sure that your HDR sliders are set like this. Alright, so for the minimum luminance, you're going to want to go to the darkest possible. This is going to give you absolute blacks. And the maximum luminance, you're going to want to do 10 clicks. Same thing with the second maximum luminance screen. You're going to want to go 10 clicks for that as well for HGiG. And this is going to be equivalent to 800 nits. This is what you're going to want to set it to for HGiG. Alright, so now what you do with Dolby Vision here in the HDR setup menu does not matter. You're not going to need to set up anything from the HDR calibration in your system menu. This is something you won't have to do if you are using Dolby Vision Gaming. So if you are preferring to just use Dolby Vision Gaming, go ahead and just turn on Dolby Vision Gaming. It won't matter what your HDR selection is in the menu, it'll just work. I tested this by going ahead and messing up the values completely, and we had the same result that Dolby Vision gave us, the same tone mapping that it did when it was set to what I had for HGiG. That tells me that you really don't need to do anything with Dolby Vision, it just works. I actually like the way that Dolby Vision looks in this game. It looks very similar to what HGiG looks like, so there's no problem with me at all using Dolby Vision Gaming. Now, for people that have other TVs, ignore Dolby Vision Gaming completely until they give you a low latency game mode for it. You're not missing out on too much. So when it comes to setting up HDR in games, there's going to be 3 different ways to go about doing it. So the first one is going to be if it's a Dolby Vision exclusive game, which we haven't had yet, you're just going to want to turn on Dolby Vision and ignore everything in the system settings. The second one is going to be if it's an HGiG game, and then you're going to want to set up HGiG to the way that I was talking about it in this video. The third way is going to be where you set the HDR up in the game itself. And no matter what you do in the system menu, it will have 0 effect on the actual game, so the in-game settings are the only way to do this. A recent example of this is from HDR in Call of Duty Vanguard. The only way to make this HDR work is to do it through the game settings menu, and anything that you do in the HDR calibration tool is not going to work. So it's not going to have any effect on the actual picture. Make sure you do set it up in the game for those type of games. So I just wanted to explain this because there's a little bit of confusion that everybody thinks that no matter what, you have to have your HDR calibration tool set up for every game. It's important to do that because you never know which games are going to be HGiG compliant and which ones aren't. So for the games that aren't HGiG compliant and you're in those games and you're wondering why your HDR looks really bad, well, that's why, because you have to set it up in game sometimes. And no matter what you do in the system menu with HDR calibration won't really affect a certain game. So you got to check to see what games support which HDR. And the best way to go about doing this is to go ahead and look at the options menu and see if there's any HDR sliders in there. And if there is, chances are it doesn't support HGiG. Now, a special exception to this is actually in Forza Horizon 5. This is a game that needs to be set through HGiG calibration in your HDR setup menu for your system. This is something you have to make sure you do or you're not going to get proper HDR unless you're running Dolby Vision Gaming. Now, the other caveat to this is in the options menu, there is a slider for brightness and saturation. I found that on the default modes, this was too bright. And the best way to fix this is going to be cranking it down to about 255, 260. You could even probably do 270 and you won't have too many highlights clip. But I do want to say take this down if you can. Leave the saturation at 100, but you could also crank it up to 109 and get some really good color out of it without even crushing out some highlights. So I do feel like the highlights from the headlights look the best when saturation is slightly up. 109% is what I went with. Feel free to change these settings and see what you like better. If you want my direct settings, I would say about 255 to 270, something around that range, and then 109 saturation. For the most part, if you left saturation alone, you'd probably be just fine. It is the brightness that you want to take down. The 300 value is a bit too high. So for TVs that aren't going to have the proper HGiG setup, is like a Samsung TV, for example. A Samsung TV is going to have HGiG, but in terms of actually setting up HGiG, it doesn't matter really what you do because you have HDR tone mapping that is undefeatable and you can't turn it off. So let me show you exactly where you want to go with your values on the screen right now. And with these values, it doesn't matter if you go above them, it's just going to tone map them and it's really not going to have too much effect on the entire game. You just don't want to go too low with the values. So you make sure you get to at least 14 clicks and you're good to go. So it doesn't matter if you set it to 14 clicks, 24 clicks, 34 clicks. It's all pretty much going to be the same on a Samsung TV that has dynamic tone mapping that's undefeatable with HGiG. I do recommend still putting on HGiG for your Samsung TV and just keeping it at around 14 clicks, and the TV will do its job at making HDR look spectacular on your TV. For other TVs, such as a Sony TV, if you want to go ahead and turn off your gradation preferred, make sure you turn off your tone mapping completely when you are setting up your HDR calibration, and then set your HDR calibration up the way you want to set it, and then afterwards switch it to gradation preferred, and you'll go ahead and you'll have a very similar effect to what HGiG can give you. So that is going to be the best way to set it up on a Sony TV. And other TVs that have a tone mapping option that you can toggle on and off, just turn it off when you're setting up your HDR and then turn it back on afterwards, and hopefully you'll get a great HDR experience. But if you don't have one of those settings, just make sure you set up your HDR calibration to the exact instructions that are on the screen. Just follow the directions and for the most part, you should get a good result. So now that you know how to set up HDR tone mapping and HGiG and everything else that goes along with HDR in gaming, let me know what you guys thought about this video and let me know what your preferred HDR mode is. Is it Dolby Vision? Is it going to be HDR tone mapping on? Or is it HGiG? Or are you somebody that just loves to play in SDR? Let me know in the comments below. If you guys could, go ahead and hit the like button if you enjoyed this video, and also give me a subscribe if you want to see more videos like this in the future. If you guys are in the market for a new TV this holiday season or any games at all, and you're shopping on Amazon, make sure you hit up those Amazon affiliate links in the description below. They will go to helping out the channel, and thank you guys so much for doing that. As always guys, thank you guys so much for watching. Have a great day, and I'll see you in the next one.